Hello everyone. In today's tutorial I'm going to be walking you through Project 1 expressions through all the steps. Part 1, we're going to collect 6 photos and remove the background. Then we'll arrange those photos to create emphasis on one, attach shapes to the background photos, add separate gradient maps, and then finally adjust details. So let's hop over to Photopea.com and click on New Project, title your project, and set the dimensions to somewhere around 10 by 10 inches. Inches, not pixels. And we've got our blank canvas. Now the first part is going to involve importing a bunch of photos. So you should have collected several selfie photos. We've got 6 for this project. There's multiple ways to get your photo onto the canvas. One is to go to File and click Open in Place. Another is just to drag and drop your images. Once your image is on here, click Transform Controls on the top menu. Make sure you're on the Move tool. And then hold down the Shift key and click on that corner. By holding down Shift, it ensures that you don't skew the image. We don't want it squished looking. And then just put your first image over in the corner. We're going to get 6 photos on here altogether. So this time I'm just going to drag and drop my photos rather than using the File Open Place. And I can drag several at one, or I can just do one at a time. If I hold down Control or Shift, I can select several photos, and then I can drag them over. And each photo, you'll notice, goes into its own separate layer. So I'm going to be using the Move tool, and I've got Transform turned on. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to resize each photo and just space them out on my canvas so they're ready to edit. I'm going to be using Z as in zoom to zoom in and out, and I'm going to use the H key as in hand to drag my canvas around. So Z and zoom and hand tool are going to come in handy. I'm going to go ahead and select the magnetic lasso tool, and the first thing we're going to do to our photos is start removing their backgrounds. So I'm turning off all the layers except for the one I'm working on, just to kind of avoid confusion right now at this point, since we have so many photographs. And I'm going to position this where I can see my whole photo. I'm going to click Magnetic Lasso, and I'm going to start by clicking near the edge of the face. So I'm going to select the area I'm going to be cutting out. And if you drag your mouse slowly around the edge, it should, kind of like a magnet, sort of stick to the edge. Occasionally though, you can click with your mouse to sort of place your own anchor points, because sometimes it gets a little confused in blurrier spots. Remember, your selection doesn't have to be perfect because you can make adjustments later. Click in the spot where you first started, and that will complete your selection. And then on the bottom right corner, click that little square for raster mask. And if you look at your layer, you'll notice a new addition there, that black and white area. And that's our mask layer. The nice thing about this is we can make adjustments to the mask, so we can bring back parts of the photo that got removed, and we can remove other parts that we don't want. So make sure you're clicked on that black and white part, and you're either going to be using black or white, and you're going to use your brush tool to draw with either black or white. So click on the brush tool, make sure you're clicked on the right layer, the black and white part, and if you draw with black, it's going to remove parts of the image. So right now I'm cleaning up around the edge of my hair by drawing with the black tool. In other cases, you may have found that something got cut out that you didn't want to remove. So if you draw with the white paintbrush, it can bring back areas. This is also good. I'm going around the edge and kind of checking to see, does it look pretty smooth? Do I need to touch up anything manually? Your goal is to get a nice, clean, cut-out image. That's a big part of this project, is just cutting out the images. So I can turn that one off, and let's go to our next photo. Again, I'm going to use the magnetic lasso, and I'm going to go around the outside edge of the head that I'm cutting out. And if you mess up, just hit Ctrl-Z. Go all the way around and click back where you started. Hit the raster mask button in the bottom right corner, and that removes your background. And then you can zoom in real close and take a look at your edges. Remember, if you use a white, it removes, or if you use a white, it adds back parts of your photo, and if you draw with the black paintbrush tool, then it removes parts. So we're going to repeat this same step for every photo, using the magnetic lasso to select an area, using raster mask to kind of cut out parts of it, and then touching up the edges with your paintbrush tool. If you look on the right side of the screen, I've got some of the shortcuts listed that I'm using a lot here. So using the brush tool, using the hand tool, the zoom tool, makes this a lot faster. And I'm keeping the other layers turned off just so I'm not kind of confused on what layer I'm on. Removing the background, touching up the edges. And I do suggest once you finish cutting out those images, at that point that's a good spot to go ahead and hit save on your progress, because it takes a little bit of time to cut out each image. On ones like this, you may have to make decisions about what goes in and what goes out. So I play around with this one for a minute, trying to decide like how much of that jacket do I want to leave in there, how much can I cut out. So at first I remove a bunch of it and I think, oh, that looks kind of weird. So then I go back with my black paintbrush and I adjust some things, and I use the white paintbrush to sort of bring back parts of it. That's part of the advantage of using a raster mask rather than just purely erasing. So all that information that we don't see, it's still there. It's just covered up by a mask. And if we want to bring it back, we can. Now at this point, I would save your image and then go ahead and give each photo a title. You may have to make up something that makes sense. But one thing that happens with this project is it gets a little confusing having all these layers and all these different photos. So now I'm on to stage 2. I've cut out all my images and now I'm ready to arrange them. So one of your images is going to be your focal point. You're going to try to create emphasis on one photo and let the other ones remain in the background. There's lots of different ways you can arrange this image. You can go with something really symmetrical or go asymmetrical. At this point I'm using the move tool, which the keyboard shortcut is V as in vary. And in order to like click on these different layers and move them around, I hold down the control key and click on the photos, and that allows me to switch between layers real quick. You'll also notice at this point I'm adding a background layer. So I added a new layer and I'm using the bucket tool to add a background. Your background could be a flat color, or you can make it a gradient. So if you right click, you can switch to the gradient tool, click at the top, and you can make adjustments to this gradient so you can have lots of different colors. Or for me, I like just having 2 colors. I don't want it to be too crazy. A lot of times with design, less is more. The possibilities are limitless, so you have to learn how to restrict yourself. Nope, and I'm on the wrong layer, so when something's not working correctly, always make sure you're on the right layer. So with the gradient tool, I have to click and drag. You'll also notice I clicked that little menu at the top and I switched from linear to radial. Those are probably the most commonly used gradients. So if you want it to go in a straight line, use linear. If you want it to be radial, as in a circle, then click the radial option. Play around with it for a little bit until you get the nice look that you want for your background. The next step we're going to do is we're going to be adding a clipping mask and attaching our photos to shapes. This is something we did in a previous tutorial. And the only thing that might make this a little tricky is just that we have so many layers and you've got to try to keep them straight. So I'm going to be labeling things as I go. So when I have a new shape, I'm going to label it the same as the photo I'm attaching it to. And what you'll notice here is I made a shape, and then I placed that shape underneath that photo, and I held down the Alt key and just clicked on the photo. So you're going to see me do this several times, and that's going to create a clipping mask. Now on a Chromebook, when you hold down Alt and you click, it may open a new menu. Just click wherever it says clipping mask. Some things will look different on Chromebooks. You can double click on that shape You'll notice the shape is its own separate layer still, and you can change the color as you go. So I draw the circle. I'm holding down Shift when I draw the circle. Then I drag it down so it's underneath the photo that it's being attached to, directly underneath. Not above, but right underneath. Hold down Alt and just click. And there you go, it's attached. Once it's attached, you can adjust the photo, drag it around, move it around, change the colors. And we're going to keep repeating this process. Drawing circle, positioning the shape, moving the layer so that it's in the right place underneath the photo, holding down the Alt key, and then adjusting. Now at this point I'm going to play around with just positioning and layout. Layout is important. Once I'm pretty content with the color of the shapes and the way they're kind of set up, I'm going to start merging the shapes and the photos together. So you'll notice I have a lot fewer layers now. And it's a little easier to drag things around after you merge these together. You'll notice the transform tool on the top of the menu there. So if I use the move tool and I click on a photo, I can click and unclick the transform tool. At this point I've made a lot of progress, so I'm going to go ahead and save my PSD file as a backup in case something happens while I'm working. Now at this point I'm going to be adding a gradient mask. So you'll notice that I clicked on that black and white layer and I used the magic wand tool and clicked on the photo, which allowed me to select just the biggest face. Then I clicked the little button at the bottom right corner and clicked gradient mask, and now I'm adjusting the gradients and colors on the largest photo. I had to select it before I did this, otherwise this would have applied to everything in the image. So select your largest photo, and then you can spend quite a long time playing around with the gradients here. You can add in several colors, you can drag those colors around. You're going to be clicking on those little boxes in order to make adjustments. And again, you want to keep in mind about limiting yourself to a degree. You could have every color on the rainbow here, but it's not going to look very good. For me, my thought process here was that I was thinking about adding warmer colors to the focal point so that it would kind of project forward, whereas on the background photos I'm going to be adding some cool colors. But honestly, I have a hard time making up my mind with this, so you'll see me go back and forth to this gradient mask later and continue making adjustments. So if you want to change those colors again after you do it, just double click where it says GRA and you can change that. Now here I'm going to reduce the number of layers I have, and I'm going to merge all those background photos together. I don't want to do this until I'm pretty happy with where everything is placed. But once everything is in its place, I can just simplify. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and merge my layers. Then I'm going to use the magic wand tool to select the colorful back, circular part of each photo. So just clicking on each one allows me to select, and I click the background. Then I go to select and then inverse, and that has instead selected the photos. So my faces have been selected. And again, I'm going to make another gradient mask. This one is applied to all of my background faces. Now if you wanted to, you could make each face a different gradient, but to keep it simple, I'm making the background faces one color, and I'm making the foreground focal point a different color. If you want to deselect, just hit Control D, and you can deselect. Now here I'm going ahead and making adjustments because I'm not quite happy with the color arrangement that I've got going on here. So it takes some fine tuning. Try to limit it a little bit. So you'll notice in my circles I didn't use all kinds of colors. I just stuck to a couple of analogous purples and pinks. And my background also is kind of limited to just blues and pink. And I'm going to adjust that foreground one a couple times. Now here I'm adding a little extra something. I've selected my face again, and I'm adding a white outline. So I've selected the face, and then I went up to the top menu and I clicked select, and I clicked modify, and I clicked expand, and I expanded it to 10 points, or 10 pixels I think. And then in a separate layer, I just filled in that space with white. And it makes it like a nice white background. Alright, now that I'm almost done with this, at the very end I'm just going to play around and experiment with drawing in some additional details to kind of give this a more finished look to it. So I'm using my brush tool in a white color, and I'm just adding some little extra flourishes. And I'm doing that in a separate layer, so if I don't like it, I can always delete it. And that is pretty much it. So we had our background layer. We have our focal point, which has its own gradient map attached to it. We have our background photos, which are smaller and attached to shapes, with their own gradient maps, a white outline, and then a couple additional details. So at this point, just save your file as a PSD. That will preserve the layers so you can reopen it later if you need to. And then export as JPEG or PNG, and that file is one that you can upload anywhere. And that's it.